Podsmashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit Podsmash Love.
Less Fighting Love. 80-bit Podsmash, where gaming goes to grab a beer.
The anime edition.
Your hosts,
Penguina and a Termite.
I am Termite.
And I am a Penguino. And today we are talking about anime.
Which is why Penguin gave you so much Japanese references.
Yes, we are going to be talking about anime and the influence it's had on video games and anime video games or anime-inspired video games. So, yeah it's going to be fun because I love talking about anime. I was watching some today, so
maybe I will have a special music at the beginning of this. That's
You
different
should.
from our usual
That'd
one.
be good. That's a good idea.
Yep.
All right. We are where gaming goes to grab a beer, and so we are just drinking
leftover holiday Ice House.
It's so good, guys. I mean, it's Ice House.
This is my dad's, one of his go-to beers, and he was
fun.
working on my basement and requested some beers, and I bought a 12-pack of this, and there are a few left, so that goes to show you that's definitely not our first pick.
No, it's better than the last time I had it, though, for whatever reason.
It's cold and it's refreshing. If it was really hot outside, I would like this.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was like sweaty and working outside, it'd be fine because it's very, very like light-bodied and bright.
Yeah.
And easy to drink.
Crisp.
Yeah.
A little tart.
Well, apparently, I think we had Ice House on the show at one point in the past. If you missed that episode, I don't know when it was, but there is a whole genre of beers called ice beers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're categorized by the fact that they are brought below freezing to get ice shards in them to pull some of the harsh taste out of them.
Yeah.
At some point during the process of brewing a beer, they freeze it. And alcohol doesn't freeze, but the water does.
Yeah.
And they do it just enough to get, like, the crystals.
It's fascinating, yeah.
It's weird.
It's weird.
And there's a whole, like, you can get
alcohol does freeze, by the way. It just freezes at a much lower.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You're right. You're correct. In our everyday refrigerators and freezers and restaurant freezers, you can put alcohol in the freezer and it will not freeze. But you're right. You have to bring the temperature really low to freeze alcohol.
I don't know what the freezing point of alcohol is,
I
but
don't either.
Someone out there who's smarter than me does.
They should post that.
They should. Let us know at
Discord. There's a link to our Discord in every single one of our show notes. In this, we have, he's laughing because generally we don't do this so early in our show, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. You can go to 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website where there's links to Google Play, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and those are links to our podcast. If we are not on a platform you want us to be, then let us know and we'll put ourselves there. We're on every single social media outlet there are Reddit, there's Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. 80bit Podsmash, 80bit Podsmash. Find us, add us, click on us, subscribe to us, write us a review on iTunes so that we can bubble up in the algorithms to the front and get some more exposure.
It's funny because it's usually not me who starts to kick this off. Usually it's you. You're like, I found some excuse to say it earlier. And so this time I gave you an excuse to say it earlier.
Good job, Penguin Man.
All right. Woo! So, talking about anime, but before we have like banter and news, and we should get cracking on it because there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the last week. There is a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with what happened immediately after we recorded last week's episode.
Right, egg on our face.
Hot on the heels. Egg on our face?
Yeah, because people listening to last week's episode will already know it.
Are you talking about Smash Bros?
No, both. Both things that we were talking about.
Okay, yeah. So we were really worried about the Final Fantasy VII remake delay that happened last time we talked about it. And now, right on the heels of that was Cyberpunk 2077 was delayed. And I believe that there's a little bit of an article I can read for you guys, since this is a news report from Jason Schreier over at Kotaku. You know how I said on Tuesday that it was a delay season? The much-anticipated sci-fi role-playing game Cyberpunk 2077 is next on the list. Now it's coming in September instead of April. Sorry, you must have known this was coming. There is a kind of a press release post from Cyberpunk. They say, we are, quote, currently at a stage where the game is complete and playable, but there's still work to be done. Night City is massive, full of stories, content, and places to visit, but due to the sheer scale and complexity of it all, we need more time to finish playtesting, fixing, and polishing. We want Cyberpunk 2077 to be our crowning achievement for this generation. And postponing launch will give us the precious months we need to make the game perfect. Now, there's some key words in that quote. That was from CD Projekt Red. That's what they tweeted. So I want to talk about, I guess the first thing is Night City is massive. Full stories, content, places to visit, right? So due to the sheer scale and complexity of it all, they need more time to playtest. That made me think of Breath of the Wild. Because Nintendo famously was saying, like, we halted development every 2 weeks and said we're going to play the entire game from cover to cover. You know, everyone, no one's
if the
writing
game is
any
playable,
code, right?
then that means playable and complete, quote unquote. That means they're going to spend the next 5 months? Is it playtesting?
Yeah, I mean,
which is
September from now is 8 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's January now, but this episode will go live in February.
Right.
So,
5 months, I guess, between when it was supposed to. Yeah, the 5 month delay. So that's 8 months of playtesting. That's good. That's smart. I remember telling you too. I was like, man, now I hope Cyberpunk gets delayed. But I was thinking like, oh, it'd be fun if it got delayed till like May or June.
September
is
a really big delay.
Yeah, it's a very long delay. But again, like you, I agree. But there was that. The other thing is the article that Jason Schreier posted about. You think that delays would cause less crunch because the developers have more time to work on it. But as he reported from anonymous sources in the gaming industry, it's actually the opposite. Now they're crunching for 8 months as opposed to crunching for
you have to imagine, like, right before these delays get announced, there's a point of no return. And the development team is working tirelessly and hard to hit that. Like, if we don't hit this goal, it gets delayed. We don't want to delay, so we're going to work super hard to hit this goal. Yeah. Well, they still didn't.
Yeah.
Until the game got delayed. So
they probably crunched and now have to crunch more. Right. Yeah, which sucks.
And there's like this weird kind of, there's the negative crunch, but there's also like not so bad crunch. There's the kind of crunch, there's like people who are genuinely passionate about their product want to work harder on it. And then there's the negative crunch that was associated with like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Rockstar with the 100-hour work weeks and the oppressive kind of, you have to do this and you don't get any extra pay, you don't get compensated and your bonus is at risk. Like, we don't know what kind of crunch is happening, and we don't have any reason to think CD Projekt Red is like putting their foot on someone's throat, saying you need to work on this game.
Right, but they're not going to publicize that. So
that's true.
It is something that won't ever get talked about unless people talk about it. So
another thing about this quote was, we want Cyberpunk 2077 to be our crowning achievement for this generation.
I figured you would zoom in on that.
I want to zoom in on that because September is right on the heels of the next generation. The Xbox Series X and the PS5 have been announced to be holiday 2020, and they're saying that this is not a next generation game, and it's this generation, and they want it to be the crowning achievement of this generation. I think the delay is awesome. I feel like they're putting the last layer of polish to really... I mean, this is going to change the future of RPG. There's these genre-defining games, and Breath of the Wild was one of them.
You think it will?
I'm speculating.
You're speculating.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. Yeah, this is going to be one of those games that all of the development teams are going to chase after. Like Skyrim was that.
Yeah.
Right. So how many open world, big, massive games? Look at how Assassin's Creed Odyssey has changed from like, you know, a linear kind of story-told game to these massive sprawling.
Even Dark Souls was that. Yeah.
Right.
Fortnite, or not Fortnite. PUBG was that, yeah. These
massive, big open worlds. Anyway, so I think Cyberpunk is going to do something along with dialogue, storytelling, decision trees, however they decide to make something new that we haven't seen before. They're going to, I think that's what they're trying to accomplish. Yeah. They're going to set something new, and they're going to be the next genre that people are going to chase after.
Yeah. Another delay that got announced was Dying Light 2.
Yeah.
Which isn't a game that I'm super excited about, but it just goes to show that, like, what we thought was a like very packed spring release window is now getting chopped up and divvied up. And I think I mentioned to you that I think over 50% of the games that were supposed to come out between like November of last year and May of this year were either delayed into the spring window or were delayed out of the spring window into the fall window.
Yeah.
So like Doom and Last of Us, which were games that were supposed to come out early this year or late last year, got pushed into spring. Yep. And then games that were supposed to come out, like Final Fantasy got delayed in that window.
And the Avengers.
got delayed out of that window. Yeah. Cyberpunk got delayed out of that window. Everything, even Animal Crossing got delayed into that window. Like everything, it's just like, it's a very delay. And it makes sense with the next generation of consoles coming out and all that stuff, but still, it's just kind of interesting how delay heavy this has been.
Funny. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
When we first started this podcast, which was over 2 years ago, we had an episode about how games are released buggy and horrible. And that was kind of becoming an okay thing. And we were concerned. Like, we don't want games that are released buggy. And I feel like the industry, it took, 2 and some years of games that were coming down the pike at the time. Like now they're coming out and they're being delayed, and delays are kind of okay.
Yeah, delays. I think the gaming industry is becoming, or the gaming community is becoming more and more accepting of delays. Yeah. I think the next step, the bigger trend that I would want to see, like this is a good start. Go ahead and delay games so they come out in good quality and hopefully without destroying your employees. I think the next step will be publishers and marketing teams no longer either fully relinquish the right to select release dates or they give developers a greater say in when a game is released. And I think the suggestion I made to you was there should be a fixed point in development where a game can be even considered to be given a
I think
release
that's
date.
the best solution on the table.
Yeah.
You have two different aspects of game development that you've just highlighted. From the publisher side, they're looking at fiscal years and pleasing shareholders, and they're looking at numbers and finances. Their information is coming from the development team. So the stuff that feeds their predictions and their estimates are only what comes out of the development team, which are the boots on the ground, the people actually developing it, the people who are technically know-how in this world. I think that solution that you just put forward is probably the best one. Like, we don't even talk about this. The publishers will start to fund it, and maybe like a phase one kind of like low budget. Here's this $500,000 or $500 million game. We'll give you the first $100 million, which is a fifth of the budget, to start the prototype. If you get this and you nail it, then we'll announce that the game is coming, and we'll have a clear shot at how long it would take to develop. And then they publicize the thing. And that's kind of how the contractor world... That's how the contractor world works in the Defense Department. It's what I'm a part of. That's exactly how things work. Like, there's different phases, and there's allotment of monies, and there's prototypes, and there's proof of concepts, and there's all these other things that happen that we don't see that in the gaming industry. And for all we know, because we are not in the gaming industry, that could be happening behind the scenes, and we don't even know. But I agree. They should just not even announce a game until they have something to show, maybe some story bits, something they've proven.
Well, then the next step is there's no release date set, and so that's phase one. And then the release date gets set when the game goes gold or something. You know what I mean? And then they can spend the entire window between announcement of the release date and release doing bug testing. That would be, I think, awesome. So
it would be good.
It wouldn't completely remove crunch because you'd still have developers trying to meet the deadlines that they want the game to come out in. But it would give them more control of the process, I think, as opposed to, hey, the publisher has set this date based on things like fiscal years and whatnot, only to have like them, now you're forced to meet deadlines that have been set for you as opposed to deadlines that you set for yourself. So that was my idea. I did want to talk about the other news that right after our last episode that we recorded, they had finally announced the next day. Was it the next day or was it like 2 days later? They announced the new Smash character.
Yeah, it was Yeah.
And as you guys know, because you're listening to this 3 weeks later or whatever, it's another Fire Emblem character.
All of our hopes and dreams immediately deflated.
It's so
seriously, Sakurai, what are you doing?
It's so frustrating, mostly because they started this DLC Challenger Pack and they announced Joker and they said the theme of this Challenger Pack is they said something along the lines of you'll get an idea as to the kinds of characters we're pursuing in this Challenger Pack, and because it was Joker, everybody thought third-party characters. And that trend continued for 4 characters.
Hero.
Joker, Hero,
Banjo,
Terry. And Terry. All not Nintendo-owned properties, and one, a completely Western character. It's a pretty cool trend. So to have a first-party Fire Emblem character from Nintendo owns Fire Emblem, to have it be a Fire Emblem character in a game that already has 7 of them, 4 of which are all practically clones of each other, is a little frustrating. They further incised Xenoblade Chronicle fans because when Sakurai was talking about it, he said he got an advanced copy of 3 Houses so that he could get a feel for the character he wanted to make before the game even came out and was available to people. And his whole excuse for not adding Rex from Xenoblade 2 into the game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, was because the game came out too late for the development process or whatever. It's like the game came out 2 years before 3 Houses and they still haven't added Rex to the, you know what I mean? So I don't care that much about Xenoblade either because it's another anime swordsman.
Hey, anime.
Yeah, hey. But it does, I mean, I understand that Sakurai is a huge Fire Emblem fan. He talked for the first 15 minutes of the broadcast. He talked about Fire Emblem and its history. But it just does seem very out of place. And I can see why fans are upset across the board. My favorite response was Jason Schreier's, though, because he posted... seemingly to make up for the Fire Emblem character announcement, they also announced that they're going to do a 6th character in the next Challenger Pack.
As opposed to 5.
So DLC Fighter Pass 2 is going to have 6 characters as opposed to 5.
And that's another $30.
Yeah,
right?
But of course, Jason Schreier posted a picture of right now, it's like Challenger 1 through 6 through 11 or whatever, and they're all question marks or whatever, but he filled in the question marks with more Fire Emblem characters saying, can't wait for the next 6 Fire Emblem characters.
Yeah.
Fire Emblem now is tied for the second most character representation in Smash.
With Pokemon.
And just one under
Mario.
Yeah. So that says something as to the...
And if it wasn't for the free extra Piranha Plant, Mario would have that's the only thing
that pushes them over the edge.
Is Piranha Plant, which was a DLC.
A free edition. And so I can see how people would be annoyed. There was some more cynical thoughts about like Fire Emblem's not that popular of a game, so it's becoming more and more clear that they're using Smash to sell Fire Emblem. And that was most clear with Corrin, because Corrin in Smash 4 was the least popular of the DLC fighters for Smash 4, and he was announced before the game came to... It had just come out. It had just been out for a week in Japan when he was released. And it hadn't even been out in the West yet. Yeah. So it was very much clearly
that was the Fire Emblem game for 3DS that had 2 versions like Pokemon.
I think so,
Conquest.
Yeah.
Fire Emblem Conquest.
I'm not sure. I don't know Fire Emblem. That's the point. Like, nobody knows Fire Emblem well enough.
Well, surprisingly enough, Three Houses outsold crazy. It set records. I sent you like 4 articles. It was like boom, 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 like 4 headlines of how successful Fire Emblem is. And so if you're...
Well, and here's a little tidbit.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about Fire Emblem in the West, or very, very few people except for like Nintendo diehards.
Yeah.
Sakurai specifically included Marth and Roy in Smash Bros. Melee to proliferate Fire Emblem in the West. Exactly.
That's how I
Fire
found
Emblem
out.
is in the West. Yeah,
and
exactly.
Immediately following that were the Game Boy Advance ports of the Super Nintendo games from Japan only. Like they were not. They're not
Which,
Super
again,
Nintendo games.
In my mind, I'm like, that's
Famicom
fine
games.
if you're a huge fan of the franchise and you're making a game and you want like, that's fine. I get that.
And those games are awesome. If you have a Game Boy Advance, go get them. They are amazing.
Yeah, but it just seems like it's just so much. It's like if the game can still be a good game and also. I think the biggest
chagrin, we probably spent way too much time talking about it, but here we are. The biggest chagrin of all of this is that it's another sword fighting character. And they even played that into their release announcement video because the lady, the anime girl, I don't remember her name, was like, another swordsman.
Another swordsman? Too many swordsmen are there.
Yeah, that's what it was. And he has a sword, but he also has all these other bladed weapons.
They gave him like bows and stuff.
You boil down what a sword is, it's a ranged handheld weapon. And I say ranged because it has a longer reach than your fist. And that was the biggest like complaint.
Mid-range, I'd say mid-range.
Yeah. It's not, long range would be like your bows and arrows or your magic, and mid range.
Lances. If you're talking about a ranged melee weapon, I would say a spear or a lance or something like that. Sorry,
that's fine. You're the combat guy. But that's the problem, is because back in the N64 days, people would tell me that I only chose Link because he had a sword and he had a longer reach than everyone, and that's why I won. And that was it. Like, ever since then, people were always lambasting the sword characters in Smash, including Melee, and then in Brawl, and then in Smash 4, and now in Smash 5. There was just so many characters with a longer reach weapon that they hold in their hands.
But people always say, people lump Link in with well, rather, I should say, people do lump Link in rightly with the anime swordsman. Yeah. But he also has a bow and bombs and a hook shot.
And this new Fire Emblem character is going to have a hook, a scythe, and
the sword turns into a hook like Ivy, and then there's that was
Ivy from Soul Calibur, right?
Soul Calibur, yeah. The sword lady in the reveal trailer said, "Too many swordsmen, huh? Okay, well, here you go. Here's some other weapons." So she has like a hammer, a bow, or he or she says it has a hammer, bow, and a spear, lance kind of thing. So, okay, cool, great. That's just like effectively like Link. Yep. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, budget Link. She's budget Link.
That's kind of the critique of Hero from Dragon Warrior. He's a sword-wielding character too. But you have Joker, and you have Banjo, and you have Terry that are all not sword-wielding characters, and they were great. Like, they're awesome.
Right. It felt like a trend, and then the trend just got blown up, and it's whatever. It's just Smash. It's just a game. At the end of the day, we got Banjo, so like...
All of that to say, when this new character was announced, I'm desperately trying to play Smash. Like, I want to play Smash so bad now. Because it just put it back in the limelight, put it back in my head, like,
Right. We're going to get 6 more characters, and I will say that 11th character better be a big one, because that's going to be the last one as far as we know. Unless they announce a Challenger Pack 3... Still, like, whatever that last character is, that's all eyes are going to be on. Yeah. Whew, man, that's when the fandom's going to get toxic. Yep. If you think it's been toxic now towards Fire Emblem, if that last one's a Fire Emblem character,
they've already been picked. They've already been decided.
Picked,
so no one can lobby for a character anymore.
Yep.
It's crazy.
People can lobby for it, but
it's pointless.
Right, yeah. Okay, let's do favorite things real quick then, because Smash, Fire Emblem character in Smash is not our favorite thing,
Not at
but
all.
doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Favorite things. My favorite thing is I finally, after 3 months, October, November, December, January, all 3.5 months, finally my sister-in-law and her family have moved out. That is not to say that I did not enjoy
Brizzle, shots fired.
hosting them. No. It's all. She will probably actually listen to this episode. So Brizzle, if and when you listen to this, it has been a pleasure inviting you into our home to help you transition to Virginia. I am happy that you now have a home of your own, and I'm happy that we now have our home back to normal.
I imagine the feeling is 100% mutual.
It is, yeah, I believe so,
be.
yeah. And they're only 5 minutes away, so we get kind of the best of both worlds.
That's amazing.
Like, we don't have to, share resources. And
get
we
her on
also,
the show again. We need to have her on.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I should have actually had her on this episode. She loves anime, so.
We should have.
Yeah. So it is nice to have, no longer have to share resources while still being able to see them all the time, because they live 5 minutes away from us, so it's pretty awesome. So yes, it's just kind of it's a relief. You know how it is, you know, and you harbor absolutely no ill will towards your family that you have to have in your home. But it is a relief to sort of like, oh, okay, back to equilibrium. I get to now watch my shows. I get to play my games when I want to play them. And it's just, there's less chaos.
A little bit of sweet freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. We still have their dog too. So, and he's great. So, it's fun to have him in the house, but without all the extra variables.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my favorite thing.
All right. My favorite thing is Death Stranding.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
You're into it?
my gosh. I didn't expect it. This game has its hooks in me so deep.
Good.
And the description of what it is, a super long delivery man, like you just run across big open worlds and deliver packages, and the challenge is kind of the environment itself. I would not have thought or signed up to be like, yeah, this game. The main pull for me wanting to play this game was that it's Hideo Kojima, and I love his stories, and I love Metal Gear Solid.
It's been so highly nominated and acclaimed.
Exactly, and so it got good reviews. Absolutely incredible game. Like, I don't know what they do. Like, the environment really is a character in and of itself.
And that's clear, yeah.
It's the Decima engine, so it's Horizon Zero Dawn.
Nothing like
style.
Actual America at all. But
no, yeah, it's not.
There's no way you can walk from, what is it, like DC to Tennessee in like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like a giant, anyone who's actually familiar with American geography, it's like a giant, Norman Reedus and the Amazing Fetus.
And he says that because Norman Reedus carries a baby. The story is bonkers. It's crazy Kojima. It's fine. I love that. But there's just something about these moments where you're running between mountain ranges in a giant field, and like a folk song kicks off, and you're just like drawn into this world, and like what you're doing matters, and it like solidifies things.
Yeah, I am more into the gameplay, I think, than the story right now. The story turned me off in a lot of ways immediately. But I love the world he built, and I love the environment, just like you said, the traversal and everything. And I love games that make the environment part of the puzzle. It just feels like, and this is apparently very typical of Kojima, it feels like it takes so long between actual gameplay.
It does. And I was going to talk about that because, like, I forgot at the very beginning of the game, there's all of this like initial storytelling that happens. It like sets the world, sets the tone. There's this rain that like ages you when it hits your skin, and if you're not protected, you'll just age and die like immediately as soon as it starts raining, so you can't get caught in a rainstorm. Well, how does that affect the world? Everyone's sheltered, everyone's covered in rain protective gear, right? So it's very dangerous to be out in the world. Then there's these beached things that are like from the dead world.
They're ghosts. They're just
like
ghosts. Think of them as
roaming
scary
between
ghosts.
and they can attack you, and they like pull you into the ground. And so that happens. That's a thing. So it makes
all
the world
very cool so far.
Yeah,
but then the actual like, characterization is
it's
tedious. The writing itself is just tedious to me.
You do a ton of deliveries. You play the game for a while between story beats, and like you said, there's hours that happen between story beats, and you don't really encounter BTs every single time.
Yeah,
and you don't encounter there's these other humans that are also malicious. They're called mules. They don't attack you every time, so you can actually spend I don't know, like 4 to 5 hours not ever encountering an antagonist.
Anything that's quote unquote exciting, but that's fine.
Right.
I don't even mind that so much. When I'm actually in control of the character, I'm engaged.
Yes.
It's the cinematics and all the dialogue.
That's the stuff that you don't like?
That stuff's it's not, to me right now, it's not well written. And maybe it gets better as the game progresses, but I also feel like he had to front load a lot of exposition.
That's the word I was looking for.
And he's still, and it just feels like every 30, and again, part of it's explaining game mechanics, but I'm just like, can you do this in a tutorial? Do you really need to have 3 characters each rant at me for 30 seconds talking about the same thing? Yeah. I just spent a minute and a half listening to people talk at me when I understood that when the first person talked about it. Come on, man. Yeah. it is just a little tedious. There are
like those issues.
I'm not quite as into it, obviously, as Termite is, but I want to be into it. Like I want to be into it, so I think I'm going to try to quote power through until it gets its hooks in me.
Yeah.
I think once I get through all the major, like, I have to explain game mechanics to you, and here's the, like, first part of the exposition, then we can actually get into things like when the story starts to take twists and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm really excited to find out more about Troy Baker's character. The dude with the mask, yeah. That, to me, is way more intriguing. Haven't gotten that far yet.
Oh, yeah, you gotta get on that. Use the mirror. I'm gonna tell all of the audience, when you're playing this game, it's an optional thing while you're in the private house or whatever you call the quarters, private quarters. Use the mirror. Talk to the baby. Like, interact with the BB and use the mirror.
I haven't gotten them. Oh, the
mirror. He does like gun, like he throws guns at himself and like dances into the mirror. You can make various emotions.
So it's like, in the like waiting rooms or whatever.
In the private room.
Yeah.
In your own room, you take a shower. Like all right. So the shower.
Sure, I get it.
Makes weapons for you. Using the restroom makes weapons for you. That's very practical. The things that don't feel as immediately practical are interacting with the BB, which is the baby. You like mount him onto the wall, interact with the baby, and then use the mirror. Mm-hmm. There are reasons for doing these.
Okay, got it. I will
do it. I don't want to spoil it because it's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. But I will do that more. Do I have to watch the 30-second of Kojima?
I would with the BB and the mirror.
Do I have to watch the 30 seconds of Kojima selling Monster Energy to me, though?
No, you can skip that every time.
All right, good.
Skip it, yeah. I always, like, he's drinking...
It's ridiculous.
Monster was replaced by something else later. Like, it was gone.
Is it?
It was something else. It was a Japanese text. I have no clue what it was.
Okay, well,
kind of looked like beer. But I don't think beer would increase your stamina, so it's weird.
Monster Energy arguably wouldn't increase your stamina when that's all you're exclusively drinking.
But that went away, and I was confused. I'm only 15 hours into the game, and I was like, oh, the Monster's gone now. So what's up with that?
Yeah, I guess they sell Japanese beer in Arizona or wherever you are.
I don't even... Yeah. So anyway,
all right, cool.
It has its hooks in me. I'm obsessed. All I want to do is play it. It's so freaking good.
All I want to do is...
No wonder it was nominated for Game of the Year.
Okay, all right.
So I love it. Keep
Sweet.
going.
All right, I'll keep going. Yeah. I'll keep it up. I want to get through it because I want to play Outer Worlds next. So.
Holy crap. Okay. We're 30 minutes
in.
We
are. It's okay. We talked about good stuff. So let's now talk a little bit more about anime in our...
Nope.
Oh,
you tricked me. I was like, wait, you skipped it.
No, we have the
DLC.
DLC is a segment of our show where we have a conversation about video games or our topic that you wouldn't normally have. And today it is more closely related to our topic, but it's also about video games. So why I said let's talk about anime is because our DLC today is what thing from an anime. It could be a plot, it could be a power, it could be a weapon or ability, a character. What something from an anime would you like to see adapted into a video game?
Okay.
So I'll let you think, because I'm assuming...
I have a couple already.
Okay, well...
But go ahead.
All right. My first thought is I would love to see some kind of game mechanic built around the alchemy from Full Metal Alchemist. Specifically, have you seen Full Metal Alchemist? Okay, Well, the idea is that they...
I want to.
Yeah, it's really good. Oh my gosh, that's really good, dude. Like, there's going to be so many anime recommendations from me this episode, so I'm just going to go ahead and set that expectation now. The basic idea is, in this world, what alchemy is it's a principle where, like, it's basically magic, but, like, it's based on scientific principles, and it's based on one fundamental principle of the law of, quote, equivalent exchange. So in order to do something, you need an equivalent thing that you're giving up, essentially. Or, in order to convert lead into gold, you would actually need to, like, pull resource, like, you need to have an equivalent amount of lead to turn into gold. Mm-hmm. But they do things, so, like, the basic premise is in the very first episode, the mother dies. It's like, this is the premise of the show. So, like, their mother dies when they're kids, and they figure out, they're like, well, what if we just get like all the amount of resources that make up a human body, X amount of salt, X amount of potassium, X amount of blah, blah, blah. And then we can use our alchemy magic and turn all that into our mother. And it goes, but that's forbidden in alchemy because like what can replace the cost of a human soul or whatever? Like what would you exchange for a human soul?
Yep.
So it backfires on them. One of the brothers loses his arm. Like it takes the magic takes his arm, and the other brother loses his entire body.
Oh wow.
And so then the main brother, who's armless, then gives up his leg in order to take his brother's soul and transmute it into a body of armor. So that's the two main characters.
Wow.
One is a double cripple, and the other is his entire soul. He's basically just a suit of armor. And they don't effectively bring their mother back to life. Anyways.
Wow.
So then they basically then he gets like a robot arm and leg. And, but then you meet all these other alchemists and they all specialize in a different area of alchemy. So you have one alchemist who basically like changes the composition of the air into like very flammable material. And then he snaps his fingers and his gloves create a spark and he makes fire. So his entire alchemy is just changing the composition of the air around him into something flammable. You have another alchemist who, the main character, the Full Metal Alchemist, he just transmutes things into metal around him.
Sounds like Mistborn.
So he takes the materials on the ground and makes spears and stuff out of them. Mm-hmm. So he even takes his metal arm and transmutes like a spike into it when he has to fight in close range. So it's just this idea of taking the things around you. I would love to see a game system where you could specialize into a specific area, and then you have to use the resources around you to do if you were surrounded by water, you could turn it into ice if that's what your specialty was, or you could turn it into gasoline. You have this a whole range of options where you could go in and very customized, but it's all based on the resources around you to do it. There's one character who takes the materials in people's bodies and transmutes them into bombs. So he makes human bombs. It's crazy, the stuff they do. They're so creative in that show with their quote magic, but it's all they set this it's very Sanderson-like because they set this.
Mistborn.
Yeah. Because they set this fixed rule that they have to follow, and you have to give something up in order to make something. So
interesting.
Equivalent exchange. Mm-hmm. I want to see it.
So, spoiler alert. The whole timing for this anime episode was because the release of Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is kind of the only.
It's been out for a couple weeks,
only game that came out in January that was worth actual discussion and excitement about it. So with that, I'm a massive Dragon Ball Z fan, and what I wished was in a game is actually a bonus. I'm going to start with the bonus. The side DLC, side DLC was the hyperbolic time chamber.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Where 1 year happens and it takes the course of 1 day. Okay. So I could spend a year somewhere else.
But in a game, would that you?
So
would you
in
want
a game,
that
it would be cool to have here's the plot, and 1 day in the character's plot. You can go spend a year in this hyperbolic time chamber in the game, leveling up, or doing whatever character development things you need to do to amass gear or craft a bunch of things, or spend time, and then you go back to the plot. But only a day has passed.
Nice, yeah,
that'd be really cool, and I think you could do a lot of cool, fun plot things with that we don't see in games.
If you had a very story-driven game that also had progression systems,
right,
that would be really interesting. Yeah.
And then the actual main answer to the DLC is also Dragon Ball Z related, and that is the sense of power that you get by watching the anime. Mm-hmm. So they had these scouts, these
the power
scanners,
levels, and
it was power level 9,000. You may have heard from the culture or whatever at large, but characters progressed in their development of power from the 9,000s were nuts to now we're in the billions. It gets crazy in that scale of increase. Every Dragon Ball Z video game has been a balanced fighting game or an RPG where you kind of level up, but the enemies scale with you. And even in the show, the new villains come in, they're that much more powerful. Mm-hmm. But there's a lack of... The anime touches on it. Sometimes they Frieza comes back from the dead. If you're familiar with the anime, Frieza is the third villain.
Yeah.
So you start with Raditz in the Vegeta Saiyan saga, and you go and Frieza's next. So
Yeah.
maybe it's the second season, the end of second season.
Something
Frieza.
like that, yeah.
And Goku goes Super Saiyan for the
It's
first
in
time.
sagas. The Dragon Ball's in sagas.
Right.
So, yeah.
So there's the Saiyan saga, and there's the Frieza saga, and there's the Cell saga.
Cell, and then Boo, yeah.
Yeah, during the Cell saga, Trunks comes from the future.
Yeah.
And it's nuts, right?
It's such a ridiculous
But the cool
show.
part is that what's awesome is that the characters have leveled, quote unquote, leveled up. This is why it's so related to gaming and why I wish they would do this more in gaming. It's my answer to the DLC, was Trunks comes back from the future and just obliterates Frieza in one hit.
Yeah.
Where there was an entire season building up to the fight with Frieza and the amount of effort it took Goku to beat him.
I feel like that
was
is
multiple
already
episodes.
present in games, especially like loot-based games like Diablo or Borderlands.
You can just go back to the first level and just wreck house.
Right, where
like
you go back to
everything.
like you play through the game the first time, and when you're still learning the game and figuring it out, like even World of Warcraft, actually, like you go in and fight the first raid boss Ragnaros or whatever, and he's one-shot him.
Yes, you're
That's
right.
basically exactly like
'Cause there was the
power
raids.
fantasies, but I see what you mean, where it's like they don't always make you feel like you can see numbers and everything, but it's not always, and you can see how fast things die, but just the scale of seeing that, like, I would love to see, like, you, not only do you kill them quickly, bosses, but to see, like, an actual physical, like, boom, crater. Like, you crater them. Like, the scale of what the power actually does in Dragon Ball Z, would love to see that somehow reflected in video game design.
That'd be great.
I can totally see that for sure.
But I forget about how like the expansions come out in World of Warcraft,
Right?
And
Yeah,
then they go back to the original raids and solo them.
yeah. You're just so powerful that
It took a whole group of like 40 level 60s to beat one raid, but you can go back by yourself at level 100 and just wreck them.
Right, and it's ironic, too, or it's even more fun when you consider that, like, the scale has gotten so much because there have been so many expansions in that particular game, where it's like, I remember back in the day when it's like, oh my gosh, you could, like, at level 70, you could go back and then do those old raids, and, like, you could solo them, but it was a struggle. It was a fight through them.
Yeah.
Now you literally can, like, press a button and just like certain characters that you have, certain characters that where you can like activate things that just do damage to enemies around you, like Moonkins, the balance druids, where they have the starfall or whatever. Yeah. You can literally just walk through the level and just things die around you.
Yep.
It's the power fantasy in that regard is.
But that's
impressive.
always like almost like a challenge run. We did a whole episode about challenge runs. It's almost like that.
Yeah.
It's not built into the game design.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to see like a power fantasy built into the game somehow. And New Game Plus is the closest thing I've ever seen to that. But anyway, that's DLC.
All right. Woo!
Meow.
Let's talk more about anime.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about anime. We're talking about anime games. It's probably going to be helpful for those who are not familiar. Everyone listening to this, whether you're an anime fan or a video game fan or not, either of those things, like our pastor Gordon, shout out, you still probably at least have some passing, like have encountered anime in some way, shape, or form up till now. It is now, it wasn't when I was growing up, but it is now pretty much ubiquitous to American culture. It's a $2.97, I think, billion industry as of 2018 or something like that. In the West. In the West alone, yeah.
Wow.
Not to mention how popular it is in Japan.
Yeah.
So yes, you probably at least know of anime and may have even seen an anime at this point. It's as easy to stumble across as video games. And I feel like it's had a similar progression in culture as video games too, but we'll get into that.
Yep.
But we'll still define it. We'll still talk about it. What it basically is the word anime is the Japanese word for animation. And outside, in Japan, anime, you would call Pixar films anime because that's the word for animation.
Yep.
But outside of Japan, anime specifically refers to
Japanese
a very specific
animation.
art style that, yes, is Japanese animation. But there's, again, the lines are starting to blur. Anime is now becoming more of a style as opposed to just a description because, like, there's the anime, like, they call them anime-inspired animations. So things like The Last Airbender, where it clearly draws heavily from anime, but it is
Produced in the West?
Produced in the West, yeah, exactly. There's tons of examples of those. But even to this day in 2020, anime still specifically refer, like, you wouldn't call anything outside of Japan. The purists would say you would call nothing outside of Japan anime. Unless you're in Japan, in which you'd call everything anime.
Right.
So that's confusing. Really, it is a art style that comes out of Japan for cartoons.
Describe this art style.
It's very hard to describe. We'll get to it.
No, it's not.
Well, I want to talk about.
Dad did a great job.
I know. We'll talk about that when we talk about Osamu Tezuka.
Okay.
I wanted to hit really quickly on manga though as well. Manga is the same style, but it's just in comic book or graphic novel form. So it's just the physical version of anime. But usually mangas come first.
They do.
So usually like someone writes and does it, and we don't see this as often in America. You don't see like all popular comics getting adapted into like TV shows and then movies right away.
We did in
You
the
see
90s.
them eventually.
In the 90s, you had X-Men, Spider-Man,
But you didn't have
Iron Man.
Guardians of the Galaxy
No, not yet.
until
Right, that
much
was, like,
later. That's what I mean.
superhero movies,
Mhm.
right? But there was cartoons that were adopted from comic books.
And you would have
forever
some
ago.
characters, but only the really popular one, only the really, really popular ones like Superman, Justice League, Spider-Man. There wasn't even Avengers were actually D-list, or a D-list team. The like major Marvel properties were X-Men and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So, but you didn't see in Japan, it's like, oh, this manga's gaining traction. Let's make a TV show about it immediately, which is part of the reason why there are end up being multiple versions of certain animes, because usually they end up surpassing. There's like two options that anime shows have when they're adapting a manga, and that is either like they either have to do a bunch of filler episodes like Naruto while they wait for the manga to catch up, or to give them material to work with. Or they do what the first there's two versions of Full Metal Alchemist. There's one where they made up an ending and just surpassed, kind of like what Game of Thrones did.
Game of Thrones, I was about to say, yeah.
Exactly. They kind of surpassed it. It wasn't as bad as Game of Thrones, but it was still bad. And then there's a different version, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is the good one, because it almost panel to panel adapts the manga and is amazing.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of the two options they have. So you throw the word manga out there. I just want our listeners to know what we're talking about when we say
physical
manga.
book that you
Physical
read.
book. Yep.
You read right to left.
Yes, because
You start at the back.
Yeah, you start
work
at
your way
what
to the
we
front.
would call the back. Yeah,
Right.
because it's very strange. But have you seen the Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask
I know they exist.
mangas?
Mhm.
They actually, I really want to read them because they look really well done. Yeah, but they're almost always colorless too. Manga's almost always
Black and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Do you say that?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I thought you might have said it.
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Okay. So eventually a art style would emerge, for both manga and anime. And that was actually penned by a guy named, what we know as what you look at and say, oh, that's anime. The work of a guy named Osamu Tezuka. And he made Astro Boy and Kimba, he made a couple other things, but those are the two that so Kimba the White Lion is basically the Lion King. And a lot of people argue Kimba was written back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Kimba came first.
And then the Lion King came later in the 90s.
Right.
And like, there's a lot of, just go look up things online of like Kimba versus the Lion King, and you'll see that like, there's a good argument to be made that visually at least, they stole a lot of the story beats from Kimba to make the Lion King.
Interesting.
But Astro Boy, I think a lot of people are familiar with Astro Boy.
Yep.
So that would kind of start the iconic style of anime,
Yeah.
which is, as you wanted to talk about,
Having a really small mouth when closed, ridiculously huge.
when it's open. He's quoting Homestarter.com character named Strong Band. So back in the mid 2000s,
Yeah, it was like
early 2000s,
early 2000s.
there were these Flash videos. There's this whole series of Flash videos, American-made Flash videos. There's a character named Strong Bad who would answer emails. And one time he was asked what he would look like as a Japanese cartoon. He said, first of all, my head would be a little bean. My body, I would have a like disproportional body, and it would have no thumbs, and
shiny.
I'd be all shiny. He'd have big baby-like eyes.
Yep.
And then he'd have blue hair for some reason, because you gotta have blue hair. And then he said, my mouth would be ridiculously small when closed and ridiculously huge when it's open.
Yep.
And then he'd be voiced by someone else. And it was this like, hey man, I'm the guy. You're the guy too.
And their mouths don't sync up with the,
Yeah, exactly.
'cause Japanese lyrics, like the show was made to be animated with Japanese text, and then they would just lay English on top.
Exactly.
And so of course they wouldn't match.
Right. And then he's like, then it would just be me in space flying through all these, like, in different action poses, flying through scenes. And what they show in the Strong Bad thing, which I thought was perfect, was there's always this, like, whenever they're trying to indicate motion in an anime, they, like, a character moving really fast, they'll just show them in, like, the camera's fixed on them and doing a cool pose or something, and the background shows, like, all these lines and just a blur of color.
Yep.
And that's like so iconically anime.
Yep.
But they're getting better. Like the animation, like technology's advanced since the mid 90s and mid 2000s. And so now it's fun to go back and watch those animes. But if you see like the newer animes, they have like really cool, like it just looks visually stunning the way they depict like fast motion in an anime. It's like My Hero Academia. I could throw out a list. My Hero Academia, or for the really try-hard anime fans, Boku no Hero Academia, Attack on Titan, some of those like newer ones that came out in the 2010s.
Yeah.
Like they just, the way they show like characters moving through space is like, oh, it's sick, dude. It's cooler than any Marvel movie, cooler than any, like think of the coolest action scene in a Marvel movie, and I could point out a scene in an anime that tops it.
All right.
I bet you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the art design is just getting, with technology, getting better and better. So, so it's got a very characteristic art style. So yeah. Whew, let's talk about games.
Video games.
Yeah. So there's
why
I call them
goes to grab a beer.
Yeah, exactly. I call them anime games. I'm not sure that that's a term that I came up with, or if people actually talk about anime games. But what we're talking about is just like the fact that they're anime and video games influence one another. So we wanted to talk about what are some examples of popular game adaptations from animes.
Well, when you first said what are anime games, my immediate thought was the ridiculously huge plethora of anime games that exist in the world that don't get any limelight at all.
Yeah, sure.
There's a huge, and it's massive across every console that has come out since the NES of anime games. And there are names that I don't even know or follow. So I will touch on some of the publishers of those, and you guys can go do your own research about what these publishers publish. And there's a laundry list of games.
Yeah.
So I started with Bandai Namco.
Yeah.
You know, they publish the Tales games.
Yeah, they're probably one of the biggest of the, or at least most popular in the West. Yeah, Bandai Namco.
And it was a joint venture because Bandai used to be separate. And Namco made Pac-Man. It's like that's how old they are, and Ridge Racer. And Bandai made newer stuff, including some Dragon Ball Z games and things over the years. Then there's Atlas. Atlas famously published Persona, so that's part of their giant library of anime games. Working Designs, which was defunct in 2005, published huge amounts of anime games from the TurboGrafx through the Sega CD and Saturn era to PlayStation 1 and 2. Some of their popular entries are like Lunar, however you pronounce it, Lunar. There's a bunch of entries in that franchise. Arc the Lad, I have a couple of those on my shelf. And then Square Enix used to be two separate companies. Squaresoft, which famously published Final Fantasy, and Chrono Trigger, and Super Mario RPG. Then there's like Enix, which did Star Ocean, among others. They were two separate companies. They merged together and created a massive behemoth of Japanese RPGs, including most notably the Nier Automata. Platinum Games developed. So Konami, which we know for Metal Gear Solid, are definitely anime inspired. Capcom, Mega Man is Astro Boy. Like, come on. Like, that's,
absolutely.
All the fighting games, Resident Evil, etc. for Capcom. And then there's Natsume, which made like Harvest Moon, which is a farming simulator kind of thing.
And very anime inspired.
Very. And then Xseed, which made a bunch of different games across the board. I think there's some Wii games that are notable. Then you have some of the actual developers. Those are publishers. Then you have developers like Monolith Soft, who made all of the Xenoblade Chronicles games. And then Platinum Games that made Nier Automata, Bayonetta, Astral Chain, etc. So like that's just a very small tip of the iceberg
and like
list of publishers and developers that make anime games.
Yeah, and there's like two types of like anime games. There are two like broad types that you've kind of hit on some of both.
Yeah.
There's games that have been adapted from animes, and then there's games that just like either inspired anime, so like then there were animes that were adapted from the games, or they're just like games in an anime style. So like Fire Emblem, like we were talking about earlier with Smash, that's very much, it may not have an anime adaptation, although it probably does, but it's also like all the cinematics are in anime style. The game's graphics, anime style.
Their
like
art book, their case art, their everything in the game is all anime.
And we talked about that briefly in our JRPG episode too, like couple years ago. So like there's even more detail we go into that in that. But we wanted to hit on some direct like anime adaptations. There's a plethora of Dragon Ball Z games. There's
oh my gosh, Dragon Ball Z is probably one of the biggest.
Yeah,
there's
fighting games,
many
and then,
Dragon Ball Z games across all genres and every system ever created.
And we recorded this episode specifically because Kakarot came
Dragon
out.
Ball Z Kakarot.
Yep, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Kakarot being the name of the primary, name of the primary character, Goku. His Saiyan name from his planet is Kakarot. Yeah. Very similar to like Superman. For those who like may not understand that, very similar to the fact that he's like Superman. He's from another planet and a different species. So in the same way that Superman's name is Jor-El or whatever.
I've
But
no
he
idea.
goes by Clark Kent.
Mhm.
In Dragon Ball Z, his Earth name is Goku, but his name from his planet is Kakarot. Anyways, it was highly anticipated because most Dragon Ball Z adaptations have been, or game adaptations have been fighting games. Like you said, very balanced.
Yeah.
Kakarot was supposed to be like a story RPG where you'd like play as Goku and
it is.
and
That's
fight
what
through
it is.
and like level up and stuff like that.
Yep.
I guess I can talk about now how apparently it's not doing so well.
It's like 7s and
being-
8s.
Really? Is it getting that high?
I checked the review today to make a thread on Reddit, which is an aggregate across
Sure.
all of them, and it's like 77 on Metacritic, which is not horrible.
Yeah.
80 is kind of the threshold. Like anything greater than 80 is acceptable. So 77 is like on that cusp.
I've heard it basically just retreads through all of the major story beats
Right.
of the anime.
and if,
it's like,
if you
just
know it
retreading all
already,
again.
then it's annoying. But
Yeah.
if you don't and you're kind of new to it, it's
Sure, that's
refreshing
probably
and fun.
Yeah.
Or if you haven't gone through that story in a while, if you haven't visited
Sure.
that world,
Yeah.
then it's fun to go back. I'm dying to play it. It looks awesome.
I've heard the combat is also trying too hard to be a fighting game
Oh, yeah?
and also then trying too hard to be an RPG and doesn't marry the two very well. So that's the main thing I've heard.
Yeah,
which
I've
is-
heard the side quests are repeatable and kind of redundant.
Yeah.
And like the stuff you do outside of fighting, outside of the main story beats, like the filler,
Yeah.
is boring and repetitive.
Yeah, well, it's being talked about a lot. You'll see a lot of stuff on gaming about it right now. Yeah. So yeah, Dragon Ball Z is the big one. There's Naruto games.
There's a ton of Naruto games.
Are there? Yeah,
Nuts.
there are actually. Yeah, there are because
Yeah.
I've seen them. There's a lot of fighting games in that too.
Yep.
Similarly,
Digimon.
Digimon. Are
Yep.
there? That's not surprising at all. Digimon's entire premise is like it's like Pokemon except inside a game,
Right.
essentially.
Yep.
And so then the monsters become real. It's so but
Digital
it's
monsters.
dying. It's just dying for video game adaptations. Let's see.
One Piece?
One Piece.
There's a
Yeah.
whole is that a
One
pirate?
Piece
Like
is-
I don't
yeah,
even know anything
pirates.
about it.
Yeah, pirates. They're trying to find some treasure, I think, is the like basic premise. The One Piece, which is a treasure. That's what the
Okay.
titular One Piece
But
is.
I've seen tons of entries in video games over the years.
It's
From the Wii,
900. It's
PS2,
one of the
and-
longest running animes of all time.
Really?
It's 900 episodes right now. Yeah,
Wow.
it's insane. So it's one that I've like always wanted to get into because people talk about how amazing it is, but also like 900 episodes. It's just like it would take me like 3 years just to get
it's
caught up.
nuts.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Gundam's a huge one. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Gundam similarly is just an anime begging for video game adaptations. Flying riding
mechs,
around in mechs.
yeah.
Yep. As I talked about earlier, Attack on Titan and My Hero Academia are both really popular right now. Attack on Titan's video game looked like a game that did one of the better jobs of adapting the action
Okay.
of the action, like the premise of Attack on Titan is like everyone's behind, like as far as we, there's things that are revealed, but like humanity has like some big cataclysm happened where basically like people turned into these giant, it's like if zombies were like 12 stories tall. So
Jeez.
like all of humanity was turned into these like giants, and the survivors who are actual humans are now behind this like 3-walled city basically. And like the show starts where like one of the walls goes down because a titan that no one had ever seen before appeared, and he was huge, and he just kicked in the door basically.
Oh, nice.
So then all the
It's
other
like
smaller
Godzilla.
ones came in and like attacked. But the guy who designed Attack on Titan wanted to basically, he's like, I want to design a show where the people fight like Spider-Man, but they're fighting against giants. so basically like they swing around, they have these things attached to their hips that shoot out cables.
Yeah.
And then they pull swords out of sheaths on their hips, and they basically like they shoot they have little triggers on the swords.
Oh, nice.
That control like when the cables release and like fire and release. So they swing around on these cables basically, and like then try to slice the titans at the back of their neck where their weak point is.
Huh.
And they do that in the game really well. So they have a game that I've seen the gameplay of, and like that's exactly what you do is you like Spider-Man around trying to attack the titans. It looks really cool. I haven't played it myself, but the gameplay looked really good. My Hero I think has games too, because I've seen the
They do.
games.
Yep.
There's a lot of games that started out as games, but and also got anime adaptations. The biggest, most popular one of all time is Pokemon.
Yep.
Pokemon started as a game, but then had an anime adaptation that's still going to this day with the same actors and everything, voice actors and everything.
Pokemon just took over the world. I mean, there's trading cards, there's every aspect of toys, video games, and of course the manga and the anime, everything.
It's fascinating to see how the anime then went back and influenced the game. So Pokemon Yellow exists because the anime was so popular in America.
Yeah, Pikachu following you as you walk around.
Team Rocket being present in Team Rocket was present in the original games, but having
not
Jesse and
Jesse
James.
and James,
But you fight them in the game in Yellow Edition.
Yeah.
So like as early as Gen 1 Pokemon was being influenced back by the video game or by the anime. So
like
it's just kind of
game
crazy.
came first, anime came second, influenced the next game.
And they have kept up like generations. Like they're just about to do the ones. I think they already have movies, anime movies for Pokemon that are based off of Sword and Shield. And that game just came out.
Yeah.
So and then the main story of the anime will very soon, probably within the next year, catch up to what's going on in Sword and Shield.
Yeah.
So
Pokemon's huge.
it's the anime is still going like strong.
Yeah.
Not just going like, oh, okay, it's cute. The anime is like, nope, we're still following the adventures of Ash and Brock and Misty and Jesse and James and all of them. Meowth is still talking up a storm and going crazy on the anime. It's crazy. Yeah. I do like to go back and watch like the first season of the anime every once in a while. It's fun. It's a fun thing to revisit, like
the
childhood.
League.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yep. Pokemon's a big one. Persona now has an anime based off of it. Ni no Kuni just recently came out with a
movie on
movie.
Netflix. I'm dying to see it. Ni no Kuni is amazing.
Yeah. Devil May Cry famously had a pretty decent anime. I was actually surprised how like good it was. It was only like a 12 episode run.
Yeah.
But it was like a surprisingly good and gritty anime. Castlevania, Fire Emblem, obviously. There was others that I was going to talk about, but those are the main ones. Oh yeah, Castlevania's anime. Yeah. But Castlevania is like is one of those Western anime inspired Western. It's not
on Netflix.
really,
Go check it out.
But it is.
I haven't seen
very
it,
good. Yeah. Cool. And then you had anime games that don't have animes necessarily, but are very heavily inspired.
Yeah, these games, like, you load up and everything about them are anime.
Yeah.
And that's, like, we can start with Valkyria Chronicles. There's 4 entries in that RPG series. It's published by Sega. The Tales series I alluded to earlier, as published by Bandai Namco. Tales of Destiny is where it started on PS1, and there's the sequel, Tales of Destiny 2, and that's led into more famous entries like Tales of Symphonia and Vesperia and Tales of Berseria. And it's just, they keep going. There's just a franchise entry in the game. Every couple of years, a new one comes out. Ni no Kuni, like we talked about earlier, was an anime later, but it was a video game first, done in the Studio Ghibli, or Ghibli, however you pronounce it, like style. Super anime inspired.
Yeah, and Studio Ghibli, for those who don't know, is like
Totoro.
Yeah, Totoro, Spirited Away,
Princess Mononoke.
Yep, Howl's Moving Castle. They're still in the kind of anime style, but they're like high caliber stories, and they're from a very, very smart individual named Miyazaki.
Yeah.
And so Studio Ghibli is his thing, but it's one kind of sole auteur. He's kind of he's kind of like the Kojima of anime, super artistic, very well done anime stories.
And you can look at it and know it's him.
Yes, yeah.
Just by looking. You can know nothing about it. Ponyo was one of them.
Yeah, it's like, not only is it anime and you're like, oh, that's recognizably anime, then you can even further be like, oh, that's recognizably Studio Ghibli.
Yep. Then there is the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series on 3DS, which I think there's a collection on the Switch now you can get. It's very, very anime inspired. I mentioned Devil May Cry as a video game first. Like you said, there was an anime later, but video game first, published by Capcom. Fire Emblem, which is published by Nintendo. A tactical RPG that has tons of anime character, anime art style.
It's all anime, yeah.
And then we actually have straight up video games that don't have any anime shows attached to them. You mentioned Kojima, and that's Metal Gear Solid. Like, there's 4, 5 plus Peace Walker and some other Metal Gear Acid. Like, the franchise of Metal Gear Solid is ridiculously anime.
Yeah.
Like, all of it, character, animation, art style, booklets, there's comic books, toys, everything's all anme. Nier Automata, published by Square Enix and developed by Platinum. Yeah, that's a super anime game. And these are just like my favorites.
Everything Platinum does. Bayonetta as well is very Astral anime. Chain. Yep. Astral Chain's probably their most.
Yeah, right.
Like, it straight up looks like an anime. Yeah.
And then Final Fantasy, of course, like all the Final Fantasy. The artwork is done by Nomura, I believe is his name. And I actually have an art collection over there on the shelf of all of his stuff. Super anime art style. All the Final Fantasies. There's 15 of them plus spin-offs. I mean, it's all there. It's all Japanese. Like, it's kind of cool to see the Japanese comic book style and cartoon style and video game style. Like, their media, that's anything drawn. Yeah. It's all drawing from the same, like, style. And it's so cool to see. And most recently, Death Stranding. It's not anime in art style. It's
Right.
realistic in art style. It looks like you and me.
Yeah.
Like it's realistic, but it has all of the things anime
Like storytelling
has.
wise, hallmarks.
Yeah, it's so out there, left field. It's so quote Japanese to our culture, like to Americans.
Mhm.
You're gonna play that game and you're gonna be like, "What the crap is going on right now?"
Yeah.
Like
It's got that surrealism.
handprints in the ground and like tar pulling up and the rain aging you. It's like what?
The baby in your throat. Yeah, it's got that sort of surrealism that a lot of Japanese culture is known for. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think a lot of ways of like The Grudge.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
The Grudge. Yeah, The Grudge is a Japanese horror film, not
Right.
anime, but like live actors, but has a lot of that surrealistic horror going on.
All of that to say,
Yeah.
is there is a marriage between the anime art style, manga, and video games.
Yeah, mhm.
And it's
especially stuff coming out of Japan. And yes,
Right.
there's sort of a more proliferation of it in America and the West. So you're starting to see that inspiration bleed into what Americans are producing as well.
Yep.
But really almost anything that comes out of the West is going to have some kind of touch on anime. So therefore, I want to talk about, for our last question, we're going to skip the last one because we're running out of time. But I really want to talk about what the crux of this episode should be is how has anime influenced video games and vice versa?
Miyamoto is quoted famously saying that anime inspired his individual games. And he's the author behind Mario, Zelda, Star Fox. I mean, he's like on everything Nintendo has made.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's very clear in the art style of Zelda, because even if the game's art itself, like the pixel graphics, even if you can't get it from that,
Right.
like the booklets and everything, like Link's drawings,
Look at Wind Waker.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Wind Waker is
Yeah.
like playing an anime,
Right.
Yeah,
And it
a
was
very
like-
stylized anime, but an anime nonetheless. Yeah.
Yep. And then the whole like mech genre
Oh my gosh.
of
Yeah.
anime and manga have proved an enormous influence on video games. From like Virtual On, which was like this arcade mech fighter that's on Saturn at home, but it was an arcade, to Metal Gear Solid, which was Metal Gear itself is this giant mech. Metal Gear Solid was inspired by a thing called Snatcher, which was an anime game. And Kojima also put in well-known anime freak into Metal Gear Solid called Otacon, a character. I don't know if you remember, he's like this doctor lab dude who like pees himself in a locker. It's hilarious. But
Yeah,
he
some
talks
recent-
about his like fandom of the
Yeah.
mech genre.
Yeah.
He's got posters on the wall and like
That's
there's
awesome.
this little cutscene that shows some of his favorite stuff. But yeah.
Yeah,
What were you
there's
saying?
a recent mech game that came out for the Switch, Daemon X Machina or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
that's very. So I want to talk about my
Xenoblade.
two. Yep. Oh yeah, my
Yeah.
two favorite mech games that make me think most about the genre.
Yeah.
That are things I've been like in the back of my mind. I'm like, oh, I've been dying to pull these in an episode of this show.
Yeah.
Mech Warrior.
Yep.
Did you ever play that?
Yeah.
PC.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, crazy old mech game.
Yeah.
And that's just first person, but you're in a mech and like you can customize
Like
your
tank
loadout. Yeah.
warfare. Yeah.
And then, did you ever play for the PS2?
Zone of the Enders? Yeah, it was
Dang
amazing.
no, I wanted to say it.
Yes, Zone of the Enders is incredible.
Zone of the Enders
I was
is
going to bring it up.
awesome.
Yeah. It's another Kojima game, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It was PvP, right? Like you played against each other, or was it?
I always played the environment. Yes, there was that mode, but I
Yeah.
played the story.
Yeah.
And it came with a Metal Gear Solid 2 demo,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
and that's the main reason we wanted it.
Uh-huh.
But it was so short. It was
Yeah.
amazing. That game was,
It was so
absolute
good.
Dragon Ball Z style, like fighting mechanics
But
with
you're in a
swords
mech,
and
yeah.
shooting things.
And you had a very
like,
customizable loadout. I remember
Yeah.
too. Like you
Yep.
could sit there and like customize your mech
yeah.
to do different
Yep.
things. It
And
was really
I would
cool.
be, I have to mention Xenogears.
Yes, of
The
course.
RPG from the PlayStation 1,
Uh-huh.
published by Squaresoft. Absolutely incredible anime / JRPG.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of JRPGs, we have a whole episode, a genre deep dive of Japanese
Yeah.
RPGs. Go check that out, where we
Yep.
go into like a deep dive of some of our favorites.
Yeah.
All of those are anime inspired,
Yep.
like
Mhm.
most Japanese
And we talk
RPGs.
about, we have a crossover that actually, that episode kind of inspired this one.
Yeah.
To talk about it, but we were waiting for a good game to
Dragon Ball Z Kakarot.
tie it to. Yeah. I wanted to talk about one of the things that I think that has influenced video games with anime is, I think anime took a track in Japan with the way it developed that we're now starting to see kind of happen with video games. So the way that they progress within the culture at large. And what I mean by that is anime, like video games, was first targeted to kids. And you can see that with Astro Boy, Kimbo the White Lion, and you can still see it today in things like games like Ni no Kuni that have that style. Studio Ghibli, most of the stuff he does, except for like Princess Mononoke, most of it is still aimed at kids. And that kind of, it's got the kind of that whimsical feel to it. But now in Japan, and what we saw even as early as the late 90s and early 2000s, we saw a push in anime to be accepted more widely among adults as like, this is part of our culture at large. This is part of what Japan culture is at large.
Yeah.
So we started to see more mature animes come out of the early 90s and into the early 2000s. And to the point where, like, if you were someone, like an adult in Japan, like, you probably watched anime.
Yeah.
Like, it was probably just, like, they would sit around and talk about anime like we talk about Game of Thrones and television shows. So there was more of a push to be more widely accepted among adults as just part of the culture at large. This is what being a Japanese person is about. You're into anime.
Right.
And it's not seen as something like in America. It's like, oh, we have terms, especially on the internet, like weebs. Like the term weeb is some like an adult who's super into anime. So it's something like in America, in Western culture, it's still seen as something that you're into, something that like, oh, you're into anime.
Right.
Whereas in Japan, it's just like, yeah, I'm into TV.
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing for them.
And we're seeing the same push with gaming. With
right.
video
Gaming
gamers.
is now starting to happen to that now, where it's like now.
You're not a gamer.
Right.
You are a person who plays video games.
Right. A person who plays video games, but like it's starting to become something like I think we're going to start to see more of a push now where it's like, it's not even that. It's not even someone who plays video games. It's just like, I'm into culture, and part of that is video games.
Right.
Like, I saw an article recently that was arguing for an idea of like, it should, in the same way that there's a stigma attached to people who don't watch certain shows, like, I can't believe you're not into Game of Thrones. I can't believe you're not into Breaking Bad. I can't believe you're not into Walking Dead, because these are the shows that like have captured the attentions at large. It's like, why isn't that there for games?
Right.
Why is gaming allowed to be this sort of separated subculture? And I think that we'll start to see those walls disappear, and that's following the pattern that anime had in Japan before it, and that even anime is starting to have in the culture at large, because more people are being like, oh my gosh, Castlevania is so good, you know, and stuff like that. So I think that in the West, those two are now happening parallel, but it's already happened in Japan in the way that it hopefully will happen in the West with both games and anime. So I think that they've been influential. They sort of like a lot of people who are into video games are into anime, and a lot of people who are into anime are into video games. So they share a lot of those
massive crossover.
Yeah, massive crossover. And so those two are influencing, those influences are going back and forth. And you can see that in the fact that a lot of game developers are in anime and games, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of sharing, cultural sharing going on. Many of the same themes that are touched on in animes and story beats are touched on in video games as well. So it's like they share a lot culturally. I think it's great. Do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, the last paragraph I have notes of. The 80s NES games introduced a subtly different visual style that is unmistakably Japanese, clearly influenced by anime. In fact, it can be argued that the NES inadvertently paved the way for the success of anime outside Japan in the early 90s, with video games forming the first wave of Eastern culture to proliferate in the United States and elsewhere, swiftly followed up by the unexpected cult success of the legendary Akira.
Yes, Akira was hugely popular.
And then there's games like Final Fight and Street Fighter, which drew heavily from anime-inspired martial arts, like early on in the gaming industry. I read that paragraph from an article I'll link off of, called denofgeek.com is the website, how anime and video games work in tandem. But I thought that was a really good way to capture the idea that if you look at any, like back in the NES era, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have like review magazines, publications that were deep diving into video games. So when you walk into a store and you saw a game, you only had the box art to go by and a brief description on the back. And that box art was 90% anime because most of the games came from Japan. So like that was kind of the Walmarts of the time, and Kmart's, Sears, wherever you bought your video game, Toys R Us, they had Japanese games front and center in American shelves. Yeah. And that was very new because anime hadn't taken its roots in American culture yet. It was very, very in its infancy at the time. Yeah. You know, until big movies like Akira and Princess Mononoke and, you know, those things, kind of the early anime
Pokemon
influence,
and things like
Pokemon
that,
on TV in the 90s even. But this was in the 80s, so it was right even before Pokemon became popular, and like before Dragon Ball Z became popular amongst us, you know, us millennials.
Yeah, no, Nintendo was like a beachhead of Japanese culture in the West, and really was like, it was, you know, culturally at the time, you know, you had 60s, 70s, like pop culture was seen as an American thing, especially in the West. And so to see in the late 80s, like, oh no, this is like, well, even during the arcade days and things like Konami and whatnot, Street Fighter and all that. Was it Konami? Am I saying the right things?
Konami did not make Street Fighter.
Capcom did. I'm sorry.
Konami made Castlevania,
Castlevania,
and Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, so those kind of coming in arcades and like, but really Nintendo kind of kicked off the sort of idea of like, yeah, quality, cultural, like, figureheads are now coming out of Japan and really, percolating in the collective consciousness in the West. And that really paved the way for anime. Yeah. I agree. Yep. Our last question was, what challenges do game designers face when adapting video games? And we're not going to dig into that, but I did want to say that, like, it's not all rainbows and flowers, not everything that comes out. I mean, like you said, there are so many games that are, like, either anime inspired or directly adapted from anime, and many of them are not good. Yeah. Or at least not good by our standards. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that anime games, or even just Japanese games in general, and we think we talked about this in our JRPG episode, one of the challenges they face is just the cultural divide, even down to, like, game systems. There's something about, like, I've told you before, I'm like, there's something about, or, like, I'll play a game and I'll be like, even the game system, the gameplay is so Japanese. Yep. And it's just, like, it can be overwhelming sometimes. And it's just like, yeah, there's a reason why they're called, a lot of these open world games are called Western style RPGs, because there's a noticeable tactile difference between the way Western audiences consume games and Japanese people consume games. And it's that divide is starting to get more noticeable as games. Yeah,
and from a capitalist point of view, you want to sell as many copies of your game as possible, and you want to appeal to as many people as possible. And Japan is way smaller than America, and way smaller than America plus Europe. So if you want to develop games from Japan, now you have to appeal to the Western audience, and they have an entirely different set of expectations, different stuff that drives them, and you got to figure that out.
And that's the same, that problem exists in anime as well, like the storytelling, just for you know, consuming it on TV or manga as well. Like, you have to appeal to what Western audiences expect from anime,
right?
And that can be limiting from an artistic perspective as well. So there's definitely this sort of, like, it's a huge industry in the West, and it's a huge industry in Japan.
A lot of money to tap into.
But that what comes with that territory is having to cater to, because you want to sell it. It's not catering so much as, like, you want to create a product that is sellable. And I think they miss as often as they do hit. And even if they're popular in Japan, that's great. More power to them. Obviously, there's tons of them and they're selling somewhere. But I can definitely see how that would be a challenge. Like, we want this game to be the best it can possibly be. What compromises do we make in order to make that happen? Any other thoughts?
That's it.
Cool. We want to hear what your thoughts are. If you're a big anime fan, or if you can't stand the stuff, we want to hear what your thoughts are, and we want to hear how you think it's influenced video games, what directions you'd like to see the two art forms and mediums take, and what you think of the kind of tandem progression of both of them. So let us know your thoughts. Termite, where can the good Podsmash of the internet?
I will give you the short version. I already gave you the long one earlier.
Sure.
The Discord link in our Facebook posts is the easiest way to interact with us live and immediately. Otherwise, there's social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit. You can start your own thread on our subreddit, 80-bit Podsmash, or you could email us, 80bitpodsmash@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some more feedback and interact with our fan base about these topics.
Awesome. Next week will be Valentine's Day week. And the episode will air on the day my son was born, his birthday.
How about that?
His first birthday.
So cute.
So cute. So speaking of cute things, our topic's going to be what we think the cutest video game relationships are.
Ooh,
cutest video game couples. Yep. So we're going to be shipping some customers. Couples. Shipping some couples. Video game couples. Shipping. So yes, that's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about video game relationships, aka cutest couples.
There you go.
It'll be so good. So fabulous. Anyways, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.